Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, another entry here based on your suggestions. This time I'm going to go more local and pick one that's here in Central Texas, or at least a little bit northwest of Central Texas. So in this case, this has to do with a strange monster of some sort that apparently only had one known sighting in one specific time period and hasn't been seen since that day. Although at the very end I'll explain that there's a good reason for that, and it may seem to be more tied to the fact that it's going to disappoint some of you here if you truly believe in this monster. But after I make the explanation, you'll realize how it makes more sense with regards to that disappointment. So it has to do with a strange monster known as the Lake Worth Monster, found in Lake Worth, Texas, hence the name, the Lake Worth Monster. So as far as its location, Lake Worth, it's somewhere a little bit northwest of, in this case, Fort Worth. So if you're heading, let's say, up north towards the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just head a little bit northwest, and then when you're there, eventually you'll find Lake Worth, and that's where this thing apparently, who knows, still resides to this day. So what is the Lake Worth monster? Well, as I was mentioning, it's a monster of some sort that only appeared once. In this case, it was specifically July of 1969. And in fact, there's only one known photograph associated with it, which you're looking at here. Now, I call it a strange monster because it seems to be, at least based on descriptions, a strange hybrid of sorts. Like it's a multitude of different characteristics all in once. For example, it's a man-like creature, yet it has goat-like feet. In other words, those distinct feet that protrude backwards in terms of its legs. And then on top of that, it's covered with fur, so it seems like it's very, very shaggy, almost along the lines of, let's say, a very hairy Bigfoot. But to add even more mystery to it, it seems to has also scales. The people that came across it apparently described it as having some sort of scales, like reptilian scales on it. So a huge mishmash of different assortments of creatures all under one place. And the way it was encountered in that summer of 1969, apparently a few couples started to see this creature near Lake Worth. Maybe they were just there dating, or they were there hanging out, who knows, but that's when they came across this creature. I mean, in fact, there was a guy by the name of Alan Plaster. He's the one that took the only known picture of it. He took it back in October of 1969, and to this day, again, it remains the only one known. He gave it to someone named Sally Ann Clark, who apparently she has more of a description related to encountering this creature, whatever it is. There are lots of reports tied to it because there was yet another person involved in this saga, and this guy by the name of Jim Mars, who was a reporter at that time. He wrote a lengthy article, it looks like, and specifically for the front page news, and of course he titled it a very catchy title. It was titled "Fishy Man Goat Terrifies Couples Parked at Lake Worth." So definitely eye-catching. That's the kind of stuff that would absolutely sell anything as far as newspapers. And then on top of that, yet another person who was involved in this strange myriad of circumstances. There's a guy by the name of John Reichart. I think that's how you say his last name. While he didn't have any physical damage to himself, he's the closest thing, though, as far as an attack, and I use that in loose quotations, an attack to him. And it had to do with the fact that something jumped, or let's say scared, something involving, I believe it was his car, because there was some sort of tire that was apparently hurled from a nearby distance. It struck his car, and then it left a 1.5 foot long scar, as he called it, a scar on it. And the police were actually brought out. I guess this is as close as it gets to any kind of official department taking a look into this monster and its attacks, because they came across him. He reported it. I'm sure they took out some kind of investigation, or started some kind of investigation with the report, and then that was it. That was the closest thing as far as any department having to do with it. But then shortly afterward, that was it. There was no further attacks. There were no further encounters. It seems like whatever this Lake Worth monster was, one who was apparently terrorizing either couples there near Lake Worth, or in this case, trying to, in the case of that guy John Reichard, trying to get them to get away by physically hurling stuff at them. No, that was it. There was no further instances. Now, cut to a couple of, let's say, decades later, and there was an investigative report that was done by a news channel there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area called KDFW. And remember how I mentioned at the very beginning of the video how there may be a bit of a disappointment associated with this monster legend. Well, it has to do with the fact that this KDFW, they did a very lengthy report on the Lake Worth monster. And what they came across, they even interviewed the original people, the reporter that I mentioned earlier, Jim Mars, and then also the lady that has the photographic evidence, Sally Ann Clark. Well, it seems like they still, to this day, believe in the Lake Worth monster and what they encountered and what they reported. The report itself did come across a bunch of high school students. Maybe they were still living there in that area. And they pretty much admitted to the reporters there that yes, they knew about the Lake Worth monster, and that's because they actually did the Lake Worth monster in terms of a prank. Like, they were the ones that were pranking the people around that area. And the way they did it was they dressed up in what they called a gorilla suit, and then lo and behold paraded themselves around that lake just to try to get attention, just to try to see who would look in their direction and who would think that they would come across this so-called monster. And it makes sense, that explanation, because obviously when you're dealing with high school teenagers or other type of teenagers, you're dealing with people that are prone to doing pranks just for the sake of, let's say, doing pranks. No real reason behind it, maybe even on the mean side of sorts, but just to make sure that, hey, they could do something risky or risque and then see, how far that prank goes. And in this case, their prank definitely made that local legend grow. In fact, to this day, and you're looking at an example here, there's still associations with the Lake Worth monster. It does have its own legend of some sort, but it does make sense, again, that these high school students would do something like this. And then just like that, as far as the reason for the Lake Worth monster just utterly disappearing from sight, just reappearing and then just completely gone the next day, it would probably be more along the lines that these high school students didn't want things to get out of hand. Like, they decided, this is something that's bad, it's let's cut it out while we're ahead, and then that way nobody can get in trouble. And so them admitting something like this 3 decades later, obviously the time period associated with criminal charges is long gone. So that's why I think that they're admitting to these things back then in 1999. But even to this day, people still believe that that's not true, that there's still some kind of Lake Worth monster roaming out, in that case the Lake Worth area, trying to attack anybody that happens to be nearby, let's say still in parked cars or just coming along the sides there. So that's it. That's all the information associated with this monster, this Lake Worth monster. If anyone has anything else, something else that they would like to state, please post those comments below. There's got to be a lot more examples, hopefully, if this thing were really a true monster between 1969 and now, in terms of other people and other sightings. What do you guys believe too? Do you think that this is truly an actual monster that roams that lake to this very day? Or was it more likely, like I explained, just something along the lines of a bunch of kids pulling a prank and then sure enough getting the attention of the local news and then turning into others finding out about it? By the way, as far as if you're wondering, well, someone did throw that tire, right? I mean, it did land on that guy Reichardt's car and impacted it. That was real. Well, it turns out that someone else, a guy who has a strange name, he goes by the name Vinzenz. Obviously, that's some kind of nickname of some sort, but he admitted in 2009, so just a couple years back, that it was him that threw the tire. He didn't do it, it seems like, as far as part of the prank, in terms of the other teenagers making up a costume and then parading around as the Lake Worth monster. No, in this case, this guy Vinzenz He apparently did it because he was playing with some friends with a tire. I guess they were rolling a tire as quick as they could, and by accident it hit a bump and went high into the air. And when it did so, it landed near that guy and then probably hit his car. And so this guy Vincent's probably trying to make sure that he doesn't get in trouble for it. They probably all scattered, and when that happened, and because of that time being the Lake Wharf monster in its heyday, and everyone believing that it was around, no doubt that the other people, in this case that guy Jim with his car, he thought to himself that that was the Lake Wharf monster, when in actuality it was someone that was out of sight playing with some friends with a tire, and then things got a little out of hand there. So there's that information too. So anyways, again, if anyone has anything else, that would be great to hear. All right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.